our guest tonight is WWE superstar Jack Gallagher. How you doing?
I am doing absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic. On November 5th at the Fab Cafe in Manchester, Figure 4 Films will debut An Extraordinary Gentleman, a documentary focusing on your life and rise in the wrestling business. How were you first presented with this project, and what were your initial thoughts on a documentary being made about you?
I was first approached in the lead-up to the Cruiserweight Classic by Adam Gill. He had previously made a film called 2 Out of 3 Falls that I had seen. And it was a documentary about the British scene and how it had evolved from the old world of sport, sort of Johnny Saint, Steve Gray era, to the early 2000s independent scene that we had. So I had been approached by him as the pitch was that I was a modern example of British-style wrestling, and that in a way it was almost a spiritual sequel to his first documentary, and that with the WWE link, there would obviously be a certain amount of interest in me there. It was actual fortuitous that by the end of the documentary I had signed a contract, so the film accidentally became about me getting to WWE.
Mike Chiari, next question.
Well, you've taken a unique path to get to the top of the wrestling business in WWE, and that's detailed in your documentary. What are you hoping that aspiring wrestlers trying to work their way up the ladder like you have will maybe take away from your movie?
I don't know. I've never really thought of myself as influential. So that's a difficult one, I guess. I hope that most people just take away that there is no one set path and there is no one set mold, and that it's a wide, wacky, fun world. Even if you don't potentially make it to the dream job, as it were, there's a lot of fun to be had along the way.
Brandon Gavin, next question.
Well, without spoiling much, because we're very excited to see the documentary, is there anything you can share with us about the film that you're most excited for fans to see or learn, or perhaps something you're most proud of from the documentary?
There's a wonderful little sequence in the film that Adam put together. I was quite happy with it, that he put classical music in the background of one of my MMA fights. And I'm quite looking forward to people to see that, because that gave me a good chuckle.
Well, I didn't know you had an MMA background. Can you expand on that just a bit? Do you have how many professional or semi-professional fights have you had?
So I fought amateur MMA fights. I fought 2. I think I fought 2 over the space of a few months. I had previously only ever competed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and submission wrestling competitions. And then I took up some kickboxing as well and just added that to the repertoire. It's something I've always been interested in. It's something, it's kind of an avenue I've always kept open as well. Even here in America, I've been training in Florida in a gym called The Jungle. Kind of the most famous member would be Seth Petrozelli, who famously knocked out Kimbo Slice. It was a hobby that turned into an amateur pursuit. It was actually something I was interested in doing professionally around the time the WWE approached me.
Oh, well, switching gears here just a bit. You mentioned the Cruiserweight Classic. Your first taste of WWE action came in the Cruiserweight Classic. How did you find out you were part of that tournament, and how did you feel when the WWE Universe instantly took a liking to you and your character?
I was first approached by William Regal, who had sent me an email saying that there was something, nothing specific, but something coming up, and that my style in particular and the way I carry myself probably best translated in a live environment as opposed to sort of seeing me work out in the ring and go through drills and the usual tryout stuff. So he had been helping me in that manner. I was overwhelmed because wrestling in the Classic was the first time I'd ever competed in America at all. So I actually had no idea how Americans would take to me. Typically speaking and historically speaking, the English are put as villains in most of your films over here. So I thought a very typical English person would get booed out of the building.
Oh no, we love the English here. I mean, there's some history, the Revolutionary War, but we love you guys now. It's different now. Mike Chiari?
Well, WWE has obviously taken a huge interest in the British wrestling scene over the past year or so, utilizing you and Zack Sabre Jr. in the CWC. They held the UK title tournament. How do you believe British wrestling as a whole has changed, either for better or worse, now that WWE has such a large influence on it?
Let me think. I think it's mostly positive. So I was just trying to think of, for worse, how is it negatively affected? I'm not sure about for worse because I'm out of the scene. I actually think this, from looking outside of the scene now and in, it seems that it's been going from strength to strength. A lot of the people who have been forced to pursue this part-time can now do this full-time. There is more exposure. There's more potential for travel, which of course means more potential for earnings, so the people can earn a better wage. And also it's a glass ceiling that's been broke. It's a path that people can travel now, because when I was beginning to train, I was thinking there was guys like Doug Williams who were phenomenal performers, but they still weren't in WWE. And, Doug's a big stocky guy and whatnot, and skinny little 5'8" me didn't even have the dream that I thought, I can make to WWE. I thought at best I would probably go to Japan and work there. But now you've got guys like me, guys like Noam Dar. You've had obviously Zack Sabre Jr. compete in the Classic with Pete Dunne, the UK champion, Tyler, Trent Seven, more than a handful of guys now who've proven that there is a path from the training school to the top of the business. So that's the main takeaway, I think.
Brandon Gavin?
Your character in WWE has shown a lot of developments, and you've been both beloved and hated by fans. How much creative input do you have in the way your character is presented on television, and what is your relationship like with Vince McMahon?
A lot of people, this is, not to plug the documentary more, but a lot of this is kind of talked about in the documentary, that a lot of what you see on screen isn't fictitious. That's usually just me being me. The loved side is me on a good day, and the side that's been hated, my wife affectionately refers to as Angry Jack. So there's that. In terms of creative input, you've got to understand that the majority of the writing staff are American. I think they're pretty much all North American. They are very aware that none of them grew up in Britain as a young British lad. So when I say to them, this is what I would probably say, I would not use this word, I would use this, or I wouldn't do this, I would do that. They're very open to it because I have a very clear idea of who I am as a person and as a fictional character. And relationship with Vince McMahon, he's surprisingly approachable. I guess growing up watching WWE or WWF as I did growing up, you think of Vince McMahon as this very larger than life scary character, and he is a larger than life character, but he's very welcoming. He's surprisingly charming. He sits down and has time for, if he has time in his schedule, which is rare, but if he has time in his schedule, he has time for anyone.
We talked about your character changes over the recent weeks. Well, now that you've played both in WWE and over the course of your career, do you prefer playing a face or a heel more? And what are some of the challenges that you face as someone who got over as a face with people and then had to convert to a bad guy?
I've always preferred being a good guy, but I think a lot of that has stemmed from being a smaller competitor. There's a certain amount of menace that is difficult when you're being villainous. I think every interesting bad guy in sort of fictional history has a certain amount of menace to them, a certain amount of danger. And in terms of overcoming that physically, that's kind of difficult for me because I'm a smaller guy. I tend to default to things like Hannibal Lecter and people like that for influences, kind of intellectual sort of scary people. No, it was a strange change. I thought myself, I was enjoying what I was doing, but then again, I thought, this is something no one's going to see coming, so it will probably work when I did a little bit of a switch.
Mike Chiari?
You've been working closely with Brian Kendrick lately, forming one of the most interesting alliances in WWE, I think. What has that been like for you, and how has working with a WWE veteran like Brian Kendrick helped you?
So when we first arrived, I say we as the British group, Noam and Zach and myself first arrived in America, the people we were driving to the Classic with, because we all carpooled, was TJP and Brian Kendrick. So Brian was one of the first American wrestlers I had any interaction with in WWE. And in fact, after my first match, Brian got my contact information and complimented me, and we had a little bit of talking about wrestling now and again and the business of it, even before the cruiserweight division was a thought in anyone's mind. It's been really wonderful for me, actually. I get to pick his brain. He's obviously got the experience on me, and in a strange way as well, it occurred to me that when Brian first started in WWE, his mentor was William Regal, and he sort of has a reverse situation now where he's mentoring a new little William Regal in WWE. So I enjoy the sort of mirrored aspect of that.
BG, final question?
Well, very early on in your career with WWE, it was evident that you were somebody that would transcend the cruiserweight division. What else do you think you need to do on your end to break away from the Cruiserweight Championship and into the conversation for the Universal Championship and other main event level opportunities?
Well, I don't think it's about breaking away from the Cruiserweight division. I think it's about elevating it in people's mindsets. I think the 205 show on the network is currently, I think, fourth or third. It's one of the most watched shows on the network. In fact, it's probably higher watched than some other wrestling shows on the network as well. I think it's just overcoming the perception that people don't like cruiserweights, because I understand that's the narrative that goes around. Whereas what it actually is, we get a lot of positive feedback both on social media and in person during WrestleMania Access. The amount of people that were big fans of the cruiserweights was startling to us. So for me, it's not escaping the division; it's about elevating them, because NXT went from a developmental system, which was considered a step down, to a completely separate brand unto itself, where people are stars and they sell out stadiums and they tour by themselves. In my head, I think if we all work, then 205 becomes good, the division becomes good, the division raises, and then there's more opportunities and there's more interesting things for everyone as well.
Fantastic. A huge thanks to our guest tonight, Jack Gallagher. Catch him stealing the show on Monday Night Raw and 205 Live every week, and catch his new documentary, An Extraordinary Gentleman, debuting November 5th at the Fab Cafe in Manchester. Tell the fans where else they can support you.
Fans can find me on Twitter at GentlemanJackG, and they can find me on Instagram as Mr. Gentleman Jack. You can find me on Facebook, but I will not add you.
I love the honesty. I appreciate the honesty, but that's not something we get in the wrestling business very often, so I appreciate that. And another huge thanks to Jack Gallagher. Good luck moving forward, sir.
Thank you very much, guys.